We've all seen AI just explode, right? It feels like one day it's a fancy calculator, and the next, it's writing poetry. But how did we actually get here? Well, the real story is kind of wild. And in a very literal sense, it's a history that's almost impossible to read.
So let's just jump right in. The big question, the one we're going to tackle today, is this. How on earth did computers learn to talk? And I don't just mean spitting out words. I mean really understanding us, grasping context, nuance, all the messy stuff that makes up human language.
The name for this whole field, this huge challenge, is natural language processing. You probably know it as NLP. It's the magic behind Siri, Google Translate, all the chatbots we argue with online. And trust me, its history as well. It's fascinating, but it's also a total mess.
Okay, so where do we even begin a story like this? Well, we have to go way back to one of the giants of computing, Alan Turing, and this really clever but deceptively simple game he came up with.
A lot of tech history is fuzzy, right? It's hard to pin down where an idea really started, but not this one. With NLP, we have this perfect, crystal clear starting point. It's all in one single, foundational paper that basically kicked off the whole conversation. And this is it, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence from 1950. Turing was brilliant because he knew asking, "Can machines think?" was a dead end. It's just too philosophical. So he reframed it. He proposed a practical test, a game, to see if you could even tell the difference between a machine and a person just by talking to them.
He called it the imitation game. We all know it now as the Turing Test. And the setup is genius. You've got an interrogator texting with two unknowns. One's a person, one's a machine. If they can't figure out which is which, well, then who's to say the machine isn't thinking? This right here, this was the starting gun, the absolute beginning for NLP.
Okay, so we have this nice, clean start. Awesome. But after that, things get complicated. The journey from that simple test to the AI we have in our pockets today was anything but a straight line. For the next few decades, progress was just choppy. It was scattered, it was slow, and a lot of it wasn't even written down properly. Honestly, it's like being an archaeologist. You're just digging around, finding a bone here, a fossil fragment there, and sometimes the things you do find are completely shattered.
And that brings us to this. This is where it gets really cool. What you're looking at is a real academic paper. Its title, Natural Language Processing, a Historical Review. The irony? It's been so digitally corrupted that it's almost totally unreadable. It is literally a history of language that has lost its own language. You can't make this stuff up.
But wait, don't write it off as just a bunch of junk. This isn't a dead end at all. This broken document, it actually tells its own story, a really powerful one. We just have to learn how to read it differently.
So here's the game plan. Let's forget about the words. We can't read them anyway. Instead, let's look at the shape of the text, the patterns, the structure hidden in all that noise. What can this digital ruin tell us about the history it was trying to preserve?
Okay, check this part out. If you kind of squint, even with all the garbage, you can totally see a pattern, right? It looks like a list, maybe some numbers, some fragmented lines. It feels like a sequence, like a timeline.
And if we follow that clue, we can kind of piece together the timeline it was probably talking about. You've got the 1950s, right? That's all about trying to hand-code grammar rules, the symbolic approach. Then in the 70s, it looks like it shifted to more formal, logic-based systems. And then, bam, the 90s hit, and it all changes. That's the rise of statistics and machine learning, where we stopped telling the computer the rules and just started feeding it tons of data to learn from.
All right, now look at this other section. See how different it looks? The whole texture has changed. It's dense, it's got these repeated kind of blocky shapes. What does that look like to you? To me, it screams bibliography. A list of citations.
So what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that this story isn't about a handful of big names like Turing. No way. This was a massive, sprawling, messy team effort. You had researchers all over the place, building on each other's work, sometimes competing, sometimes completely unaware of what the other person was doing. It was a total patchwork.
But maybe the biggest clue of all is just the feel of the document. Look how the texture of the garbled text itself changes. From one part to the next, you can see this really dramatic shift in how dense and chaotic it looks. And this really breaks it down for us. Look at the parts talking about the early days, the symbolic era. The text looks cleaner, right? More orderly.
And that makes perfect sense, because that's what they were trying to do, create neat, human-defined rules. But then you get to the statistical era, and it's a mess. It's dense, it's chaotic, and that is a perfect reflection of the science itself, shifting to these complex, data-driven, probabilistic models. The mess on the page literally mirrors the messiness of the ideas.
So, okay, we've been playing digital archaeologists here, right? We've managed to pull a whole story out of this broken document. But so what? Why does any of this messy history actually matter today?
Well, it matters because this entire journey, this fragmented, chaotic, almost unreadable path, is the reason the AI we use every single day works the way it does. This isn't just some fun history lesson.
I think the big takeaway here is that progress is never, ever a clean, straight line. The AI we have today, it isn't magic. It's built on decades of forgotten work, of trial and error, of all this messy collaboration. And all of its strengths, and yeah, even its weird little quirks and biases, they come directly from this chaotic past. If you want to understand how today's AI works, you've got to understand the messy foundation it's built on.
And that really leaves us with one last kind of spooky thought. This corrupted paper is such a perfect metaphor. It makes you think, if this is the history we can barely read, the stuff that was actually documented, what about the parts that are truly lost, the ideas that were never written down, the forgotten breakthroughs? How much of this story is just gone forever?